the angels and the demons, they know a lot of things that we don't know. After all, they've been around since time immemorial, and they are familiar with heaven itself, so surely they can tell us many secrets. Well, the church, you see, would take a dim view of that, and they could be put to death for that sort of thing.
The Rosicrucian Society had been formed in England prior to Bacon's birth, in part for the purpose of protecting Queen Elizabeth I. In the 16th century, the conflict between Roman Catholicism and the Protestant Church of England was at its peak. Mary Tudor, the daughter of King Henry VIII, took the throne and earned the title Bloody Mary.
They were looking for another heir, and so there were no boy heirs of, or no legal boy heirs of Henry, but he had daughters, and so we have Mary. And Mary was now 37, she was one of his daughters, and so she was installed as queen, and that was just after he died, so that would be in 58. And she was a Catholic, a dyed-in-the-wool Catholic, and she had actually married Prince Philip II of Spain. Of course, he was a Catholic too. So the first thing that Mary did was to repeal those laws which permitted the Protestants to practice their religion. Repealed them and then forcefully put to death as many Christians that were of the Protestant faith as she could find. Within the confines of the data that we have, she put to death 300, so there was 300 martyrs there that we know about in the short 6-year reign that she had.
No one was safe from Mary's wrath against the so-called Protestant heretics, not even her own sister. Elizabeth Tudor was also the daughter of King Henry VIII, with his second wife, Anne Boleyn, whom Henry had married after divorcing Catherine of Aragon, the mother of Queen Mary.
When she was installed as queen, she put her sister Elizabeth I in jail because she was suspected of being a Protestant, so she went to the Tower of London.
While imprisoned in the Tower, Elizabeth formed a friendship with a mysterious member of the court, a mathematician and mystic named Dr. John Dee.
He was known in the early Elizabethan days as the real wise man, the magus, and he was into a lot of esoteric study. You know, he was certainly an initiate of the wisdom traditions.
Dr. John Dee was one of the foremost geniuses of his day.
John Dee was 34 years older than Francis Bacon, and John Dee was a mathematician, lived in London. He was a mathematician and astrologer to Queen Mary Tudor. That's Bloody Mary.
While Dee began in Mary's service, he soon fell out of favor because of his bizarre experiments, and some say his friendship with Elizabeth. In any case, Dee was imprisoned under suspicion of sorcery, an accusation that would follow him throughout his life, and one that seems not unfounded considering his system of magic is still practiced by many occultists to this day.
One thing that he is most noted for today among occultists is that he and a fellow named Edward Kelly, who was a medium, did magical invocations related to the Book of Enoch to produce an entire, what today is called the Enochian system of magic. And it's this incredibly complex language and alphabet and cubes and magic squares, and it's extremely complex, and it's very, very powerful.
In his quest for knowledge, Dee tapped into the powers of the beyond, hoping to learn secrets from the spirit realm.
But that's not to say he wasn't trying to communicate with angels. He did. And they can be contacted and talked with. Roughly it means messengers of God. So that's what Dee was trying to do in his own way. But he obviously was too open about it, so in the end he got persecuted for this.
But not everyone saw Dee's dabbling as communicating with angels of God. Dee once wrote that he was looked upon as a companion of hellhounds a caller and a conjurer of wicked and damned spirits. Yet like Bacon, he practiced much of his craft in secret as an active member of the Rosicrucians in England. Some even credit Dee with founding the modern Rosicrucian movement. As such, communing with angelic beings that provide scientific knowledge was a familiar practice.
Now, there was a pretty very brief and shady dividing line between what they called scientific knowledge and what we might call outright witchcraft today. It was the demarcation there was very shadowy.
This shadowy line was one that Dee crossed many times. Yet for a while, he flourished under the reign of Queen Elizabeth. During this era, some believe that he was a kind of mentor to Sir Francis Bacon.
Well, we know from Dee's diary that Bacon made one visit, at least, to Dr. John Dee's home at Mortlake. And when these visits were recorded, Dee was meaning people had come to talk with Dee and discuss esoteric matters with him and to use his library and so on like that. So we know that that's a historical record we have. Otherwise, it's circumstantial evidence. Bacon clearly knew Dr. John Dee because he was an important person in Queen Elizabeth's court, and Francis Bacon was a courtier.
Perhaps the reason for the lack of records in Bacon's relationship with John Dee is that their work was done behind the veil of secret societies.
There's always been these secret societies trying to promote learning and raise the level of people's thought and culture to a kinder level and higher level. But mostly they've worked in secret because the church, most of the different churches have been so, not very kind.
The problem we're dealing with here is that Europeans discovered an awful lot of information, and very important, good, solid information of sciences that had been, developed richly elsewhere and that were brought into Europe and were so threatening to Christianity that they had to be suppressed. We know what happened to Galileo, and we know what happened to endless numbers of Giordano Bruno and so many others in science. They had to go underground. So the process of forcing knowledge and wisdom underground created a lot of coding and a lot of buzzwords and a lot of secret gestures and terms that still aren't understood to this day. So Dee is amongst that group.
While men such as Galileo were persecuted for representing scientific knowledge, the secret societies of the Elizabethan era were in danger not for the knowledge they possessed, but how they obtained it, through occult practices of summoning spirits and conjuring demons. They were, nevertheless, determined to continue for the cause of science and learning. Dr. John Dee led the way in this arena. His method became known as angel magic because of his contact with spirits that Dee believed were sometimes good and sometimes evil. At one point, Dee's angels compelled him to visit the Holy Roman Emperor, Rudolph II, and tell him that he was wicked and that if he did not repent, God would throw him down. Incredibly, Dee obeyed the angels, visited the emperor, and established a friendship that would help to protect him from persecution later on. In his experiments, Dee worked with a medium named Edward Kelly. Kelly was the one who often made contact with the spirits Dee communed with. In a diary entry of June 8, 1584, Dee records a startling account. He claims that Kelly was greatly troubled when the angels tried to persuade him that Jesus was not God, and that no prayers ought to be made to him. They further claimed that sin did not really exist, and that man's soul simply moves from one body to another, in what sounds like reincarnation. Upon hearing this, Kelly was apparently distraught, and believed they had contacted evil spirits.